Hi, my name is Chelsea and I'm with the Volusia County Public Library at the Hope Place branch. This is the third and final video of my How to Play Dungeons & Dragons series. Today I'm going to show you the basic rules of a D&D campaign, so let's get started. First, we're going to start with the physical components of the game you'll need. We're going to start with a board with 1 inch by 1 inch squares that are going to represent a 5-foot radius. For these, you're going to need a miniature figurine, which we just call minis. This is my own hand-painted half-elf bard named Baratheon. Using this board along with minis create a visual aid for you to play the game and kind of give you an idea of where you are on the board. Now let's talk dice. The first die we're going to talk about is the D20, arguably the most important component of the game and definitely the most well-known about Dungeons & Dragons. It's used for almost everything, from skill checks to conversations to any game action you can think of. The D20 is used to see if an action is successful or if it fails. It's essentially to see if you can do something or not. It really just makes the game more fair and balanced. Its sides are labeled from 1 to 20, and the higher number you get, the more likely you are to succeed. A natural 1 is called a critical or a crit, whereas a 20 is called a natural 20 or a nat 20. The next largest die is the D12, which is labeled from 1 to 12 and is primarily used to determine the damage made by larger weapons and attacks. This is also true of the D8, which resembles 2 pyramids touching base to base. Our next 2 die are the D10s. One is labeled from 00 to 09, and the other is labeled from 0 to 9. When rolled together, they form a percentage. Following these is the D6, the cube. I'm sure you've seen it before. It's used to determine damage from smaller attacks from weapons and spells and in character creation. Our last die is this itty bitty triangle, which is just used for smaller healing spells. Now that we have our dice out of the way, we're going to talk actual gameplay. After gathering your materials, finding a campaign to play, and finding people to play with, it's time for you to start your first campaign. While playing, remember it is 100% okay to reference your handbook because it's probably going to give you answers to every question you'd ever want to ask. Now let's talk combat. You're in the middle of an adventure with your friends, traversing the forest, having a light conversation, maybe having a snack, when an owlbear attacks. First, your DM is going to determine if any of the players are surprised. If a player is surprised, they are put at a disadvantage. Disadvantages and advantages in D&D can either be a blessing or a curse, depending on who has the advantage. When at an advantage, you will roll your D20 twice and take the larger number, whereas at a disadvantage, you will roll your D20 twice again, but take the lower number. In this situation, we'll say you're surprised, which means that for the owlbear, the DM will roll the D20 twice and take the higher number for his attack. Once the prize is determined, the DM will determine where everyone is on the board, also known as the marching order, and then they will ask everyone to roll initiative. Rolling initiative determines the order of the players' turns in combat, and it requires you to roll your D20 once and add your initiative score from your character sheet. In combat, there are several actions you can take, the first 2 being moving or attacking. To attack, you can either use a weapon or a spell, depending on what your character is capable of. Whether you're using a spell or a weapon, you will first roll your D20 and then add any appropriate modifiers, such as proficiency or surprise, to your roll to see if you succeed or fail. The modifier for spellcasting, as well as the amount of spells you know, as well as the type of spells you know, is determined by what class you are. You only have a limited amount of spell slots before you take a long rest. However, cantrips are unlimited, can be done on any turn, and do not require a spell slot or a long rest. If you succeed your hit, roll for damage. Although your proficiency bonus does not apply to the damage you deal, there are other modifiers when done with weapons that do sometimes apply. For those, you're going to have to reference your handbook. There are other activities that can be done during combat, such as dodging, preparing a weapon, or disengaging from an enemy, which means you can move past them or out of their range without provoking an attack from them. Combat is just one of the many fun parts of D&D, but some campaigns omit combat altogether. These campaigns mostly involve role-playing and interaction with the environment and the world that the DM has described. You can learn more about the world and explore it, meeting non-player characters, also known as NPCs, and going on your own quests and adventures. Remember that these adventures are up to you. This game is about decision making and having fun with your friends. Although this was just a basic explanation of D&D, there are so many other things that can be found in the player's handbook and in millions of online resources. I hope this gave you a solid idea of the components of D&D so that you can have fun playing your first game. Remember that the handbook is your guide, but your mind will do the rest. Remember to follow us on our channel at Volusia Teens Read, and remember to turn on notifications so that you won't miss a new video. Happy adventuring!